I'm about to take y'all in my godfather crib so he can show y'all my religion.
Yo, the rapper behind 2025's massive 6 to 7 wave hit Instagram with some wild energy on New Year's Eve. He posted photos holding 2 doves and a chicken like it was just another regular night online. But then the next slide flipped everything upside down. The birds were dead, one animal's heart was sitting on the floor, and there was a glass filled with blood right beside it. People online instantly started freaking out. While everybody else was celebrating the new year with parties and champagne, Skrilla had the internet staring at something way darker and way more disturbing. This is the same rapper whose 6 to 7 line was everywhere on TikTok. The same artist whose music had kids and adults repeating the lyrics nonstop all year. Then suddenly he's posting images tied to animal rituals on Instagram with zero hesitation. Like this was completely normal to him. And the craziest part is, he never tried to keep any of it secret. No cap, Skrilla has been upfront about this from day one. He talks about these beliefs in interviews, throws references into his music, and posts this kind of stuff directly on social media himself. None of this was leaked or exposed behind his back. Skrilla uploaded it proudly and stood on it loud. So when mainstream audiences finally noticed, social media exploded like people had just uncovered some hidden mystery nobody saw coming. You need to hear this because the story goes way deeper than just one rapper and his religion. This is about somebody who grew up in one of the roughest areas in America, survived conditions that would crush a lot of people, and built his entire mindset and spiritual beliefs around the chaos he lived through. Then the internet saw pieces of it and reacted with fear, confusion, and a whole lot of misunderstanding. Here's the full picture from the start. To really understand Skrilla, you have to understand where he came from because his environment and his spirituality are tied together completely.
Seen the pic when I killed the chicken?
Yeah, you gotta cut his head off.
And the goat?
Yeah, you ate it?
No, sacrifice that shit.
Why sacrifice it?
There's some blessings. Some blessings.
One shaped the other. Jamil Edwards was born on June 3rd, 1999, and raised in Kensington, Philadelphia, an area heavily known for drug activity and addiction struggles. If you know anything about Kensington, then you already know how intense that place can be. People across the country have talked about it for years because it became one of the most visible examples of the opioid crisis in America. Streets filled with addiction, people struggling openly in broad daylight, families trying to survive around nonstop violence and instability. For a lot of kids growing up there, harsh situations became part of everyday life instead of something shocking. His background also plays a major role in his story. His mother is Mexican and from Texas, while his father is African American from Philadelphia. That mix of cultures becomes important later because it connects directly to the spiritual practices and traditions that became part of his identity and public image. Skrilla has described his childhood as the best time of his life, and that statement catches a lot of people off guard. He said he started selling drugs around age 12 in his neighborhood, 12 years old. While most kids were focused on school, sports, or video games, Jamil Edwards was already caught up in the street economy of one of the toughest neighborhoods in the country. What really stands out is that he doesn't describe those years as pure misery. He calls them the best years of his life. And that says a lot about the survival mindset he developed early on. Instead of seeing himself as defeated by his environment, he adapted to it and built his identity around surviving what was happening around him.
You can put bad spirits on people too. Like you can put a person's name and like their birthday inside the. You can put them inside the agoon pot, and like you basically sending.
That mentality shaped almost everything that came later. As he got older, he ended up dealing with several heroin-related charges and spent about 2.5 years on house arrest during high school. Imagine being a teenager stuck with an ankle monitor, watching the outside world move on while you're trapped inside your own neighborhood. That kind of isolation changes people. What makes his story even more layered is that music wasn't even his first dream. Before rapping seriously, he wanted to become a fashion designer and also spent time involved in community activism. That's a side of his story most people never hear about because the internet usually pushes a much simpler image. Eventually, fellow Philadelphia rapper and childhood friend Rico Havoc encouraged him to start making music. Soon after that, Edwards recorded his first track as Skrilla called Dog Food, and that became the beginning of everything. Skrilla dropped his debut single Green Snake back in 2018, and from that point until around 2022, he was grinding independently non-stop. No major machine behind him, no overnight industry shortcut, just constant work trying to build his name in Philadelphia's already crowded drill scene. Over the next few years, he released projects like Cutthroat and Gemini Season, slowly building a fan base piece by piece while balancing street pressure, legal problems, and life in Kensington. But through all of that chaos, one thing stayed connected to him the entire time: his spiritual beliefs.
I go like metal, like they could get shot, stabbed, something could happen to him.
So it would be something in metal that would kill him. Right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's different ways you could do things though. Like you can actually put somebody's name in your shoe and keep it or in the bottom of your sock or in your shoe, like bad happens to him. Like yeah.
That's important because Santeria wasn't something Skrilla suddenly picked up for attention or shock value online. According to his own statements and public image, it was something connected to his upbringing and identity from early on. Now, before going deeper into the controversy, people need some context because a huge amount of the outrage online comes from misunderstanding what Santeria actually is. A lot of reactions happen before people even know the history behind it. And without context, the conversation quickly turns into panic instead of facts. Santeria is an Afro-Caribbean spiritual tradition that combines Yoruba beliefs from West Africa with elements of Catholicism. The Yoruba spiritual system is one of the oldest and most influential traditions in African history, with roots tied to areas now known as Nigeria and Benin. During slavery, many Africans brought to places like Cuba, Puerto Rico, and Brazil were forced to practice Catholicism publicly. But instead of abandoning their original beliefs, they blended traditions together in order to preserve them secretly. That's where the connection between Orishas and Catholic saints came from. For example, Yemoja, associated with the ocean and motherhood, became linked with the Virgin Mary in some traditions. Oshun, connected to love, beauty, and rivers, became associated with Our Lady of Charity. Through generations of pressure and oppression, these practices survived by adapting instead of disappearing, and that history still shapes how Santeria is viewed today. Santeria is not devil worship, and it is not Satanism, despite how people online try to label it.
Which is the path opener, Ogum, Ochosi, Shango, Aigayu, Ochun, Yemaya, Oya, Salasaro, Mabatala.
This is a spiritual tradition that survived generations of slavery, oppression, and forced conversion by adapting and preserving its roots. Over time, it spread across parts of Latin America, the Caribbean, and communities in the United States. That connection also lines up with Skrilla's Mexican heritage through his mother's side, which helps explain why these traditions became part of his world and music. He has openly referenced Santeria in his songs for years. Tracks like Words from Osun and Words from Yemaya directly mention important Orishas connected to the religion. These aren't random, mysterious figures thrown into lyrics for shock value. They are deeply respected spiritual symbols with centuries of history, meaning, and cultural importance behind them. One of the biggest points of controversy surrounding Santeria is animal sacrifice, which exists in certain ceremonies and traditions within the religion. This is usually the moment when social media starts exploding with outrage and panic. But the debate becomes more complicated when people start comparing religious sacrifice to how animals are treated in large industrial food systems every day. A lot of critics react strongly to the spiritual aspect because it feels unfamiliar or unsettling to them. Meanwhile, millions of animals are processed daily for commercial food production with almost no emotional reaction from the public at all. That contrast is part of why conversations around Santeria become so heated online, especially when celebrities or rappers bring these practices into mainstream attention. Within Santeria traditions, different animals are connected to different ceremonial purposes and meanings. Chickens are often used in cleansing rituals or ceremonies tied to protection, while doves are commonly associated with peace, purity, and spiritual guidance. In these practices, followers believe sacrifices help strengthen the connection between practitioners and the Orishas. Traditionally, the blood is viewed as part of the offering.
Really, well, the path opener. This is the person who you can talk to when everything is going down and you feel like you're stuck between a room where there's no way out. You know, you speak to that while you do things with.
While the meat may later be prepared and shared within the community. These practices are not new or hidden. They've existed for generations, are heavily documented, and are still followed by many people around the world today. But once a rapper from Kensington brought images connected to those traditions onto Instagram in 2025, the internet instantly treated it like some shocking new scandal. That's where things really started colliding for Skrilla. His rise in music and his spiritual identity were both becoming more visible at the exact same time. As his fame increased, more mainstream audiences were suddenly exposed to parts of his beliefs and imagery that had already been present in his music and online persona for years. In 2023, Skrilla signed with Priority Records and later released his first single under the label, Booted. That was a major moment because Priority is a legendary name in hip-hop history, known for working with artists like Ice Cube, NWA, and Snoop Dogg. This wasn't some tiny underground move anymore. The industry spotlight was officially getting bigger around him. Then in early 2024, he released the album Underworld, followed later that year by Zombie Love Kensington Paradise on November 1st, 2024.
Anyway, there's a goon.
That right there's a goon.
One is Ochosi. He's the hunter of the religion. That one is Chango, the Lord of Thunder, Lightning. This is Ochu.
And that date caught attention too because November 1st lines up with Dia de los Muertos, also known as the Day of the Dead in Mexican tradition. Fans quickly noticed the symbolism, especially considering how heavily themes of death, spirituality, and heritage already appeared throughout his music and image. That release timing and imagery wasn't random at all. Skrilla clearly tied his music, visuals, and cultural influences together in a very intentional way. Fans who already understood the symbolism connected the dots immediately, especially people familiar with Santeria traditions and Mexican cultural references. But for audiences who had never seen any of this before, the reaction started turning uneasy fast. Then everything exploded online. In September 2024, a snippet of Skrilla's song Doot Doot 67 got uploaded to TikTok by an anonymous account. At first, it looked like another random sound catching momentum, but within months it became impossible to escape. By February 2025, the sound had reportedly been used in over 126,000 TikTok videos. The 6 to 7 trend spread everywhere. Schools, sports clips, parties, live streams, all over social media nonstop. And that's when the internet did what it always does. People stopped asking about the song and started asking about the person behind it. Once users started searching deeper into Skrilla's background, they found old Instagram posts, interviews discussing Santeria, and imagery connected to his spiritual practices. For many mainstream viewers, this was their first exposure to any of it, so the reaction instantly became chaotic. Suddenly, headlines and viral posts were everywhere describing how the creator behind the massive 6 to 7 trend had shared photos tied to a New Year ritual involving animal sacrifice. Images showed Skrilla holding 2 doves and a chicken, while later slides displayed the animals dead alongside ritual objects and blood imagery. Social media completely erupted after that.
Just to further our understanding, how much does these figures mean to you guys?
Well, to me, they mean the world. They mean everything.
With some people defending cultural traditions while others reacted with shock and outrage. Here's where the conversation really shifts. A lot of artists avoid talking openly about personal beliefs, especially when they know controversy could damage their image or career. But Skrilla has done the opposite. In interviews and podcast appearances, he's spoken directly about his spiritual practices instead of hiding them behind vague answers or mysterious marketing. During multiple conversations online, Skrilla has referred to himself as a Santo and has also mentioned practicing Palo, referring to Palo Mayombe, another Afro-Caribbean spiritual tradition connected to ancestral rituals and ceremonial practices that can include animal sacrifice. These statements caught even more attention because most mainstream audiences know almost nothing about these religions outside of rumors or horror movie stereotypes. According to how Skrilla describes it, being born Santo means this wasn't something he suddenly adopted later in life just to create an edgy image.
Just you just get it and you gotta actually take care of everything and do the stuff that you're supposed to do.
In these traditions, spiritual practices are often tied to family lineage, cultural inheritance, and ceremonies passed down across generations. The belief system teaches that certain spiritual paths and relationships with Orishas are established early through tradition and community rather than social media trends or celebrity branding. Palo Mayombe adds another layer to that identity. While Santeria focuses heavily on the Orishas, Palo traditions are often associated with ancestral spirits, nature forces, and sacred objects sometimes referred to as ngangas. Because of the symbolism and rituals involved, Palo is often viewed by outsiders as more visually intense or mysterious. But practitioners see it as a deeply structured spiritual system requiring serious discipline, training, and initiation. That's why Skrilla talking publicly about both Santeria and Palo surprised so many people online. To followers of those traditions, these aren't casual labels somebody throws around for attention. They represent long-standing spiritual systems with deep cultural roots and responsibilities attached to them. And once people started connecting those beliefs to the imagery, symbolism, and themes inside his music, the internet debate only became louder. Absolutely. If you listen closely to Skrilla's music, the themes are all over his catalog. His lyrics regularly touch on drug culture, survival, spirituality, Santeria references, and his Mexican heritage. Even the titles of his projects, Underworld, Zombie Love, Kensington Paradise, carry dark, spiritual, and emotional imagery that matches the atmosphere of his music. The production style adds to it too. A lot of critics and listeners described his beats as eerie, haunting, and unsettling. But for fans paying attention, that wasn't random. His sound, visuals, and lyrics all seem connected to the same worldview and spiritual influences he openly talks about in interviews. The issue is that most mainstream audiences don't really have context for those references. So when they finally noticed them, reactions got intense fast. And once Skrilla's beliefs became a major online topic, two completely different sides of the internet started forming around him.
What you think, Skrilla?
It feel like Haitian. I fuck with this shit.
Yeah! Put you on.
It's good. It's like a raw food, but better. Yeah.
That's that shit. You approve. Oh.
What people said about him often revealed more about their own beliefs and fears than about Skrilla himself. One side came from religious commentators and Christian-focused creators who immediately started calling his practices dangerous or demonic. The second, his spiritual beliefs became mainstream conversation. Reaction videos and dramatic headlines started flooding YouTube and social media. Pastors reacted to his Instagram posts, creators made videos warning people about Santeria, and comment sections exploded with accusations of devil worship. A lot of that response ties into a much older history. Afro-Caribbean religions like Santeria and Palo Mayombe have faced criticism and fear from parts of Western society for generations, especially during colonial eras when African spiritual traditions were heavily targeted and misunderstood. That history is part of why these conversations still become so emotional and controversial online today. That kind of fear-based framing never fully disappeared from mainstream Western culture. So when a rapper like Skrilla openly talks about Santeria and Palo traditions, some religious communities react with the same suspicion and condemnation that has surrounded Afro-diasporic spiritual practices for generations. And that's really the bigger point here. For many people, the controversy isn't actually about Skrilla himself. It's about the discomfort and misunderstanding that still exists around African and Afro-Caribbean religions in mainstream culture. Once those beliefs suddenly became attached to a viral rapper and a huge internet trend, the reaction got loud fast. But while one side of the internet was attacking him, another side stayed completely loyal. A huge part of his fan base either understood the traditions already or simply focused on the music and didn't see the controversy as a reason to turn away. The 6 to 7 crowd kept running the trend non-stop. Philly supporters continued backing him heavily, and fans from Afro-Caribbean and Latino communities felt represented seeing elements of their culture appear openly in mainstream hip-hop. For longtime supporters, the spirituality wasn't viewed as some shocking secret. It was part of the authenticity they believed made Skrilla different from artists who create fake personas just to go viral. They had watched him reference these beliefs for years before mainstream attention ever arrived, and despite all the backlash, his momentum only seemed to grow. In late February 2025, Kyle Pagan from Crossing Broad reportedly called Skrilla the hottest rapper in the city of Philadelphia right now. The controversy didn't slow the buzz down at all. If anything, it pushed even more attention toward him because internet outrage often ends up making already popular artists even bigger when fans believe the image and story are genuine instead of manufactured drama. People can usually tell when an artist is playing a role versus when they're showing their real identity. That's a huge reason why Skrilla's fan base stayed locked in even during all the controversy. A lot of listeners feel like he's being fully honest about who he is, whether people agree with his beliefs or not. To them, the music, the visuals, the interviews, and the spirituality all connect into one real story instead of a fake industry image. Hip-hop has always had a complicated relationship with religion and spirituality too.
You mentioned your religion. What religion exactly do you represent?
I'm a Santo. I do Palo. I'm a Santo.
What's that mean exactly?
Like all that sacrificing goats and all that shit not just for like, that's real life.
You sacrificed a goat?
Really? I sacrifice goats, chickens, mice. Like, I do shit for certain shit though. Like, I'm not allowed to explain it how you want me to explain it. I think how you want me to explain it, but yeah.
Like hard to Google?
You could Google it, but it ain't gonna explain. It's like
The culture has never followed just one belief system. You've had 5% Nation teachings woven through New York rap history, Nation of Islam influences across multiple generations, Christian themes crossing into rap and gospel, and Rastafarian ideas shaping parts of reggae and reggaeton-influenced music scenes. But even with all that diversity, there's always been a certain comfort zone in mainstream entertainment. Some spiritual messages are accepted easily, while others instantly make people uncomfortable. And Skrilla's public image pushes directly into that uncomfortable space. The references to Orishas in song titles, the ritual symbolism, the darker visuals, and the imagery connected to ancestral traditions all stand out sharply against the polished version of spirituality that corporate media usually embraces. His music doesn't fit neatly into the inspirational talking to God style that award shows and advertisers are more comfortable promoting. That's part of why this conversation became so massive online. Underneath all the outrage and viral reactions, there's a bigger debate happening about which spiritual traditions are accepted in mainstream culture and which ones still get treated as dangerous, strange, or unacceptable the moment they become visible on a large platform. The bigger question people keep circling around is this: whose spirituality gets respected as culture, and whose gets instantly labeled dangerous or demonic the second it becomes visible in mainstream entertainment? Because a lot of the same people reacting strongly to Skrilla's ritual imagery have no issue when artists openly pray to Jesus on stage or reference Christianity in their music. Both can come from sincere personal belief, yet one often gets accepted automatically while the other gets treated with suspicion. That difference didn't appear out of nowhere. A lot of these reactions connect to long histories involving which religions became normalized in Western culture and which spiritual traditions were pushed to the margins. Conversations around Afro-Caribbean religions have carried tension for generations, especially because many of those traditions trace back to African roots that were heavily misunderstood or demonized during colonial periods. And this pattern goes way beyond hip-hop. Throughout history, Black and brown artists across multiple genres have often seen their cultural expression labeled dangerous before eventually becoming mainstream later on. Early jazz musicians were attacked by critics who called the music immoral. Blues was described by some religious leaders as the devil's music. Then rock and roll, which grew directly from Black rhythm and blues, sparked outrage once it exploded into popular culture. Over and over, the cycle looked similar. Cultural styles tied to marginalized communities were first framed as threatening or corrupt, only for watered-down or commercialized versions to later become accepted and celebrated once the original context got stripped away. That history is part of why debates around Skrilla became so emotionally charged online. For some observers, the backlash surrounding Santeria references in hip-hop feels connected to that same historical pattern of misunderstanding and condemnation toward unfamiliar cultural traditions. Others strongly disagree and simply view the imagery as disturbing regardless of cultural context. Either way, the controversy around Skrilla turned into something much larger than one artist because it tapped into deeper arguments about religion, race, culture, and who gets accepted in mainstream spaces. Now, when you zoom into the hip-hop community itself, the reaction becomes way more layered than the loud internet outrage makes it seem. A lot of Black and Latino listeners come from families and neighborhoods where traditions like Santeria, Vodou, Candomblé, and other Afro-diasporic spiritual systems are already familiar parts of life and culture. For many people, these practices aren't mysterious internet aesthetics or shocking headlines. They're family traditions passed down through generations. They came from Cuba, Puerto Rico, Haiti, Brazil, West Africa, and other places where these spiritual systems survived through migration, history, and community. To listeners with those backgrounds, Skrilla doesn't feel foreign at all. In some ways, he feels recognizable. That's a huge reason why some fans connected with him so strongly. To certain audiences, he represents parts of their culture and spiritual identity that usually stay hidden from mainstream American entertainment. A lot of people grew up learning to keep those beliefs private because they worried about being misunderstood, mocked, or judged. Then suddenly a mainstream rapper is openly referencing orishas, rituals, ancestry, and Afro-Caribbean spirituality in public without toning it down. That kind of representation matters to people who rarely see their traditions reflected openly in hip-hop culture. And for many supporters, Skrilla isn't doing it as some calculated marketing move. He's simply presenting himself the way he already has for years. But even inside communities connected to these traditions, reactions aren't all the same. Some practitioners, elders, and initiated members have mixed feelings about sacred rituals and ceremonies being shown publicly on social media. In many Santeria traditions, certain practices are considered deeply private and spiritually protected. So while some people view Skrilla's openness as representation, others feel uncomfortable seeing ceremonies or symbolic imagery turned into viral internet content. The debate over whether posting rituals, ceremonies, or initiations online respects the tradition or crosses a line is a real conversation happening inside those communities right now. And honestly, that discussion deserves more attention than the simple "is Santeria evil?" arguments that usually dominate social media, because the deeper issue is way more complicated than internet outrage. A lot of these spiritual systems were built around privacy, family connection, trust, and sacred community spaces. Now they exist in an era where fame runs on visibility, viral moments, and non-stop exposure online. That creates tension for practitioners trying to balance tradition with modern celebrity culture. And Skrilla is basically living inside that tension in full public view. Whether intentional or not, he's pushed conversations about Afro-Caribbean spirituality directly into mainstream hip-hop spaces in a way that rarely happens at this scale. People aren't just reacting to one rapper anymore. They're reacting to questions about culture, religion, privacy, authenticity, and what happens when sacred traditions collide with internet fame. Now take a step back and look at Jamil Edwards' full story for a second. He grew up in Kensington, Philadelphia, one of the most heavily documented areas connected to poverty, addiction struggles, and the opioid crisis in America. He started hustling at a young age, dealt with heroin-related charges as a teenager, and spent years on house arrest during high school. By the standards most systems use to predict outcomes, people from situations like that are statistically expected to struggle for the rest of their lives. But somehow, he still built a career and forced his way into mainstream attention. And he didn't do it by erasing his past, softening his image, or hiding parts of his beliefs once the spotlight showed up. He brought all of it with him publicly, even knowing it would make a lot of people uncomfortable. He made it by presenting himself exactly as he is, completely raw, unapologetic, and unfiltered. Kensington, Santeria, Palo, street stories, drug references, spiritual symbolism, all of it came together at once without trying to soften the image for mainstream comfort. Then the internet exploded around him. His song Doot Doot 67 became one of TikTok's biggest viral sounds in 2025 and launched the massive 67 trend everywhere online. More than 126,000 videos used the sound. His popularity skyrocketed. Major industry opportunities opened up, and his fan base became intensely loyal. And the controversy surrounding his religion didn't really slow that momentum down, because a lot of the people expressing outrage were never the core audience supporting him in the first place. Meanwhile, the listeners who connected with Skrilla felt like they were seeing somebody genuine in an industry where authenticity can feel rare. That's the word people keep coming back to: realness. Fans saw an artist who didn't create a polished fake persona for sponsors or corporate approval. He openly referenced his spiritual practices in album names, lyrics, visuals, interviews, and social media posts long before mainstream audiences started paying attention. Instead of hiding controversial parts of his identity, he put them front and center and let people react however they wanted. But that level of openness comes with a price too. Authenticity in the music industry isn't free at all. Every public post connected to rituals or controversial imagery can affect opportunities behind the scenes. There are likely brands that would avoid working with him, radio stations that may hesitate to support him, and mainstream audiences that instantly pull back once they look deeper into his background. Some parents probably heard their kids repeating 67, searched his name online afterward, and immediately felt uncomfortable with what they found. That tension between viral fame and controversial public identity has become a huge part of Skrilla's story. Every one of those reactions has real business consequences attached to it, and Skrilla still keeps moving the same way anyway. That's not just shock value or random chaos. To a lot of fans, it looks like conviction. In a music industry where artists constantly smooth out their image for algorithms, advertisers, and public approval, that level of commitment stands out fast. Think about how often artists sign major deals and suddenly everything changes. The music becomes safer, the interviews sound more scripted, the visuals lose their rough edges, and the personality that originally attracted fans starts getting polished down by label meetings, marketing strategies, and corporate pressure. That's usually the standard path once major industry money enters the picture. Sign the contract, chase crossover success, and slowly turn into a more marketable version of yourself. That happens all the time. But Skrilla signed with Priority Records in 2023 and still kept posting controversial spiritual imagery years later, including the New Year ritual post that sparked massive debate online in 2026. Whether people agree with him or not, that's clearly not the usual major label formula. Instead of reshaping himself into a safer mainstream product, he seemed to double down on the identity and beliefs he already had before industry attention arrived. For supporters, that represents a level of artistic and personal backbone they feel is becoming rare in modern hip-hop. A lot of fans respect the fact that he didn't suddenly hide his background once bigger opportunities showed up. And there's another side to this story people don't talk about enough. Kids growing up in places like Kensington are watching all of this happen in real time. Not the polished, perfect success story version that usually gets promoted, but somebody showing the messy reality of where they came from without pretending to be completely transformed for public approval. For some people, that sends a powerful message that success doesn't always require erasing your neighborhood, your culture, your family history, or the beliefs tied to your upbringing just to fit into mainstream spaces. That message is hitting hard in communities where success usually comes with pressure to change yourself, hide parts of your culture, or leave your background behind completely. Skrilla is presenting a totally different path, whether mainstream culture fully understands it yet or not. Instead of separating himself from where he came from, he brought all of it into the spotlight at the same time. The music, the spirituality, the environment, the heritage, everything. And while the internet is still debating him nonstop, Skrilla already seems focused on whatever comes next. That's what makes this story bigger than one viral controversy or one TikTok trend. When people look back years from now at Afro-Latino artists openly bringing spiritual traditions and cultural identity into mainstream hip-hop without hiding it, Skrilla will probably be part of that conversation. That's a legacy bigger than social media outrage cycles, bigger than reaction videos, bigger than headlines trying to paint him as just another controversial rapper. Love him or hate him, people can see he's standing on who he really is. And in today's music industry, that level of authenticity is rare. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think the backlash against Skrilla's religion comes from genuine concern, or is it mostly cultural misunderstanding and fear of unfamiliar traditions? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share this with somebody who's been following the whole Skrilla situation online.